Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the June office hours. This should be a really good one. As a reminder, if you have questions, don't hesitate to enter them into the chat window. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben to get started.
Thank you, Bill. Let me go ahead and share my screen, folks. Let me know if you're not seeing the slides. All right, today I and Greg are going to present to you folks. I am the Layer7 API Gateway Product Manager, and Greg is my counterpart and the product manager for the API Developer Portal, OTK, and MAG SDK. And so we're going to begin today's office hours with a quick announcement about the upcoming upgrade weekend. That's this weekend. So if you're not already aware of it from the community posts that we made previously, you don't have a whole lot of time to react to this now. But if you would like to try to take advantage of this upgrade week, then we have this link that I can paste in the meeting chat to a Google form that you can fill out to register for support to upgrade this weekend. And the idea is that you and support would work together to document your upgrade plan, and then support is going to have dedicated support resources available over the weekend to help you support you during your upgrade. So again, just a heads up, not a lot of time left to catch up to this if you're someone who's still wanting to upgrade from an older version of Gateway to a newer version of Gateway. But there might be an opportunity if you go fill out that form now and you're able to react quickly to take advantage of this. Otherwise, this is something we'll probably plan to continue to do for our Layer 7 products, and maybe you'll be able to take advantage of it the next time it comes around. So I did put the link to the Google form in the chat. If this is something you're interested in, you're welcome to go out there, fill that out, and coordinate with support to see if you can be prepared in time to have their support to upgrade your environment this weekend. Otherwise, the rest of this office hours is going to be dedicated to our progressive delivery model and giving you a quick high-level overview of what it is, how it's changed a little bit recently, what progressive delivery features we've already delivered and are available in which different states, which ones we're working on next. And then we're going to have several demonstrations of several of the more interesting progressive delivery features. And at the very end, we have a bunch of links to additional useful resources, including other demo recordings of the same or other progressive delivery features that we'll also paste into the chat for you. So we've been talking about this progressive delivery model for a little while now. We usually present it during our roadmap presentations to customers. So maybe some of you have already been introduced to this model. It's changed a little bit, but in general, this progressive delivery model is something we've adopted to try to more quickly get new features and functionality into our customers' hands early so that they can begin providing us feedback to influence how we'll enhance those features going forward and to indicate customer demand to help us prioritize the advancement of those features. And so again, you're going to see in some upcoming slides that we're leaning into this pretty aggressively. We've already delivered many features as experimental. We've already advanced a few as preview with plans to advance more of the existing experimental features to preview soon. And of course, that just puts all of them on a fast track to general availability. Again, based upon the feedback we get from you and the demand that you indicate. So experimental features are features that, we whip out quickly. They're mostly functional, but they receive limited testing from us. they're not distributed with an official product release. Rather, we have to give you access to them upon request in some different ways depending on the feature. It could be a box share link to a experimental assertion. It could be a box share link to an experimental custom gateway build if it requires core gateway changes outside of an assertion. It could be by giving you access to a private GitHub repo. But essentially, experimental features are not publicly available, and you have to request access for them. There are generally no tech docs for experimental features, but some lightweight documentation usually accompanies them once you have access. They're only supported by the portal for in the community portal for non-production use, right? So we announce them in the portal, though we do have tech doc pages that list our non-GA features with links back to where they were announced in the portal. That's how you become aware that these features are available. That's also where you would go and request access to the feature, is by, posting a reply to the community portal post for that feature. And that is also where you would ask for help with the feature if you're having problems with it. And then the product team and possibly the engineering team would try to help support you for those problems that you're reporting through the community portal. But again, these are otherwise not. Oh, go ahead. Someone have a question?
At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
1. Okay. So the main point here is that Broadcom support does not support experimental features. If you do get access to an experimental feature by requesting that access through the community portal and you do have a problem with it, you should not open a case with Broadcom support. If you do, they'll close the case right away. Again, you should go to the community portal to ask questions about experimental features. The next stage in the progressive delivery model is preview. So these are nearly completed features, though they might not be fully completed. We do distribute them in official releases, possibly immediately visible and usable by everybody, possibly hidden by a feature flag to only be used by a select few. But because they're a part of official releases, they do have documentation in our tech docs. But like experimental features, preview features are generally community portal supported for use in non-production environments only. However, once progressive delivery features have reached the preview stage and are mostly complete, we will entertain customer requests to provide full Broadcom support of those preview features in their production environments, based upon the current capability of that preview feature. But customers have to ask for that, and the Layer7 product team has to approve that. And that's done by those customers opening a Broadcom support case, asking for that, for approval of that support. So again, we've already released some preview features. We have plans to advance other experimental features to preview soon. Hopefully you're aware of these, you're asking to try them out, you're providing us feedback. If a feature's a preview feature and you like the way it currently works and you're itching to use it in production, but you require full support for it, open a support case and ask for approval of that. Now, what is it, what's required to, be approved for full support of a preview feature? We'd probably want to have a conversation with you about your use cases and about your understanding of the current capabilities of that preview feature and whether it meets your use cases. And then we would also compare you to, probably a growing list of customers that have already asked for full support of the preview feature, because we've got to draw a line on that somewhere, so that we don't overwhelm our support and engineering capacity with support for preview features across too many customers. And so you might have a good use case, but we might still not approve your use of the preview feature in production environment, because we might have already hit the maximum number of customers that we can support that way. So it's nothing on you, or how important we feel like, we feel like our relationship with you is. It has more to do with just already hitting capacity. Now, the more features that we sign up, the more customers we sign up that way, the more obvious demand there is, the quicker we can accelerate then those preview features all the way to general availability. And those features basically receive the full engineering rigor that all GA features receive in our development process. And when we release them, they're fully documented, fully supported, for use by all customers in production environments. So these are the progressive delivery features that are currently available between the portal and the OTK. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Greg really quickly just to talk about the API products preview feature in the portal before I cover the gateway features.
Thanks, Ben.
Greg?
Yeah. So the API products, that was a feature that was made available in the 5.2 release of portal, which was, I believe, last February. In the documentation, it is labeled limited availability. There was a kind of a change in our nomenclature. So if you see limited availability, it still fits what Ben described as preview. So it is available. It is in the product. It is controlled by a feature flag. And as Ben was stating, if it's something that you'd like to use, reach out to support and we could talk more about that. And I'll go through that feature in a little bit further detail here shortly when we get to the demo section to kind of walk you through what all it does.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And thanks for pointing out that one might still be labeled limited. I kind of alluded to some recent changes in the progressive delivery model. We previously recognized 4 different stages: experimental, preview, limited availability, and general availability. But we found that the differences between preview and limited availability weren't significant. Having 2 separate stages was confusing, both for us and for our customers. And it often got in the way of customer adoption of the features. And so we think by, distilling it down to just experimental and preview and general availability, where preview features are ready to, offer to some customers upon request with limited availability support, is going to be clearer and basically smooth the way for more of you to get that limited availability support for those features sooner. So we hope you feel the same if you're one of those customers waiting to get limited availability support for one of these preview features that you're seeing. From a gateway perspective, we have released GraphMan as preview in 10.1 CR3, and we're going to port forward it to 11 CR1 that is tentatively scheduled to release on August 9th. So it will be a preview feature ready for limited availability support for a select few customers in all the latest gateway, 10.1 and 11.0 gateway versions soon. Again, this is a feature that many of you are probably already aware of. We've been talking about it now for a while. It's a very exciting feature that many people have already requested access to, evaluated, and expressed an interest in using in production. It's also a very foundational feature for us going forward. If you're not familiar with GraphMan, it's essentially a new gateway management API based on GraphQL. It's a newer, more flexible, more capable alternative to, but not replacement of, GMU and RESTman. It does address a lot of the issues that people have had with GMU and RESTman over the years, though. So it's, it's already a more capable management API in that sense. And we're definitely building a lot of feature functionality on top of GraphMan. We have released the Layer 7 operator as experimental. If you're not familiar with operators, they are a Kubernetes construct, if you will, that can manage the deployment and scaling of your gateways, but also continue to run in the Kubernetes environment with a awareness of our Layer 7 products that Helm charts and Kubernetes alone don't have, and the ability to actively manage them in many different ways. So we've currently, up till now, we've supported Helm chart deployments of our products to Kubernetes. The operator is going to become another way of deploying Layer 7 products to Kubernetes. And while you can deploy the operator with a Helm chart, the operator is something that's going to continue to run in Kubernetes and can continue to actively manage our Layer 7 products with, a very specific awareness of how those products work and how our customers use them, so that it can do unique things on behalf of them that Helm and Kubernetes alone just can't do. We also recently announced experimental static and dynamic config as code examples that use both GraphMan and the operator, and the best demonstration of these capabilities is actually bundled with the operators. You're going to see me demonstrate later. We also announced as experimental open telemetry tracing and metrics, which we've also bundled with the operator, and you'll also see me demonstrate later. We have previously released environment variable support for the gateway to be able to access environment variables with context variables in policy. We are actively in the process of advancing that experimental feature to preview for the 11 CR1 release that's coming up. We also released an experimental OAuth token introspection assertion, which is one step in the direction of allowing us to decouple your API gateways from your OTK gateways, and allow you to basically deploy and manage the OTK as a service to API gateways that otherwise you might deploy at the edge in front of your APIs that are securing those APIs with OAuth, but maybe doing many other things on behalf of those APIs without having to deploy any OTK components to those gateways. Rather, this assertion, which as an experimental assertion needs to be requested by us and deployed by you to your gateways, will become an out-of-the-box assertion that's going to be included with every gateway. That is the only thing you need for those gateways to be able to require and inspect OAuth tokens provided by our OTK, but it's also been designed to work with any industry standard OAuth provider that supports introspection, and I'll demonstrate that later. We've also released an experimental distributed key value storage assertion. When I demonstrate this later, I'm going to compare it to our local cache assertions, which, just store key values in in-memory cache per gateway, but not distributed across gateways. And you could also compare this assertion to our tactical remote cache assertion. It's been around for a very long time and has supported storing key values in a variety of different external storage solutions. This is going to be a new assertion that builds on top of a existing external storage provider framework that's already in our gateway and being used in different ways, that will distribute those key values across those external storage solutions, unlike the local cache assertions, and more like the tactical remote cache assertion, and might eventually replace the tactical remote cache assertion. We have recently we have released a GraphQL assertion, I should say assertions, because there's actually two assertions that show up in your palette with this assertion. And we're actively advancing that to preview for 11 CR1. The two assertions that will come with this and out of the box in 11 CR1 for preview are going to be a GraphQL schema validation assertion that will validate GraphQL requests against their schema, and a GraphQL query parameter parsing assertion, which will essentially parse GraphQL query requests to give you context variable access to their parameters in policy, because GraphQL is not an XML or JSON format. And so this assertion just makes it easier to parse the request to get access to that information without having to use a bunch of regular expressions, for example. We had released a new WebSockets capability as preview last year. This new WebSockets capability supports WebSockets and HTTP over a shared port using Tomcat versus our, longer, our long available WebSocket support that, required dedicated ports supported by Jetty. That longstanding WebSocket support is still there. It still works. In fact, it's the more practical of the two solutions, just not yet, because this preview WebSockets feature is sort of half complete, and we still have it on our backlog to complete in future PIs. But that is available as preview in current gateway releases. We did release support for the gRPC protocol as experimental, and that's on our backlog to advance to preview in future PIs. And then we did release updated support for XSLT 3.0 transformations, and finally JSON schema validation using later versions of JSON schema, including 6 and 7. Now, this is a list of what's currently available. In the lower right-hand corner, you see links to where we've announced the availability of these features, and there's more information available for them in the community, or where they have tech docs available to them, like the preview features will for API products and Graphman and WebSockets, or in the gateway tech docs, there is a non-GA feature page that lists all of them. And each of them also has links back to their community portal post. I put these here just to show you that there are places where you can go to find out more about what's currently available. These links I'm going to copy to the meeting chat at the end of this meeting, along with some other useful resources. Coming soon, we plan to do additional work to decouple the OTK from the portal. So this will just be one more step towards decoupling the OTK from both the portal and the gateway, not because we expect the OTK to go away. It's a very important product for us and many of our customers. Some of our customers use just the OTK. So it's here to stay, but this gives customers the option to manage it separately as a service, and also the flexibility to deploy and configure and use their portals and gateways in different ways without being tightly coupled to the OTK. From a gateway perspective, we're currently working on a distributed rate limit assertion that actually will use shared rate limit counters in external storage solutions, beginning with external Hazelcast when we release it as preview in 11 CR1, and also supporting Redis in 11 CR2. At the same time, we're working on a preview feature to make Redis available as an alternative to external Hazelcast for all the things external Hazelcast can currently do in 11 CR1. And then we've got a number of other experimental features And by the way, many of these progressive delivery features that you're seeing are very closely related to our cloud initiative and the detailed phased roadmap that we have for executing on that. And so a number of these additional experimental features you see here are on that roadmap, and that includes policy as code. So we're going to demonstrate config as code today. Policy code would be the next evolution of that, allowing you to, author policy and text files maybe that you manage in GitHub outside of Policy Manager. So the ability to easily author policy without having access to or being an expert, of the policy editor and Policy Manager. We also are going to deliver an experimental capability for integrating with external secrets key cert management solutions to manage those things for your gateways. Experimental support for PEM formatted PKI directly as part of that previous feature, which often present the keys and certs in a PEM format versus the PKS format that we natively preferred to date. We are going to demonstrate OTel tracing and metrics today using Jaeger and Grafana as other popular solutions in the industry for presenting that kind of information. But in terms of our cloud native reference architecture, we're sort of leaning towards the X stack as a single external stack that can be deployed and managed, that can handle more things, including OTel tracing and metrics and logging and auditing and otherwise. So we're in the process of building a bunch of pre-built dashboards for the X stack that will make easy to deploy to act together with, our products. And based on some engineering analysis that we've recently done around recommended gateway, and other Layer 7 product insights that we know that we already provide ways for customers to monitor, or that we think customers should also be monitoring. We're going to build all of that right into the dashboards. And then finally, a distributed throughput quota, which is, in the same vein as distributed rate limit. Arguably, you already can do this with external Hazelcast today. We'll extend this with Redis and other storage providers going forward. So that's the progressive delivery model, how it works, what we've already delivered with it, what we're planning to deliver soon. And now we'd like to demonstrate a number of these key capabilities to you, beginning with the API products in the portal. So I will hand it over to Greg.
Thanks, Ben. Share my screen here. Hopefully everyone has seen the documentation here. So this is the link to the API products. As I mentioned earlier, currently labeled limited availability, but yeah, it falls in the preview category that Ben covered. The API products feature, really the goal of this is to enable you to take a collection of APIs along with their associated usage limits. So these are the rate limit and quota objects. And then be able to assign those to organizations. So instead of, for example, picking 5 different APIs and individually assigning those, now you can create a product consisting of those 5 APIs and then assign just that product to the organization. If I go to my portal, I'm going to log in. So with one of the limitations with the current preview status of this is that it does only provide visibility to the admin user. So it is fully functional. You can fully manage all the products and relationships, but everything must be done by the admin user for this first view of this feature. If you go up to the Manage menu, first thing you'll notice under Rate Limit and Quota, so I'm going to click on that one. You will notice now there's a new level called Product Per Application. And for example, I have one here called Unlimited Product, which is currently assigned as a default level, and it has no rate limit and no quota. So it's truly an unlimited rate limit and quota to give full access to anyone assigned to that. If I were to also go back to the other levels, so I could actually create a new level. Let's say I wanted to add a new call it gold level type. So I can say it's a gold product is for the product per application. I can give it a rate. Let's say maybe it's 200 per second and a quota of no more than 1,000 per hour. Right. So I can save that. Now I have this rate limited quota object that's applied at the application product per application level. And what product per application basically means is the limit will be applied to the product as a whole for each and every application. So for example, if there are 5 APIs, again, within that product, that limit can be used across one of those APIs or all of those APIs collectively, but regardless, that limit will be applied to every API in that product collectively. So you can decide if you want to use it all on one API or 2 APIs or whatever, but you won't be able to exceed it across the entire product itself. The new menu item you'll see when products is enabled is under manage products. So one thing to note, this by default is not visible. There is a feature flag. And again, if you're interested in using the product, you can contact support. They'll be able to give you directions for turning on this feature. But it will not be visible until the feature flag itself is enabled. When you first click on products, there's a listing of current products. So for the first time, this will be empty. In my case, I do have one product that I've created. There's also the notion of something called tiers. So for every product, you have multiple tiers of access. So in this case, I've added a gold and a silver. I might decide I want to add another level and bronze, right? So what happens is every product will be able to have gold, silver, and bronze tiers. And when I go to create that product, I'll be able to define what that means in the context of that product. So the definition of tiers is global, but the meaning of them in each product can be different. And if I go and so let's add a new product. I'll just call this one the office hours demo. So this is kind of just initially an initial product. I go to rate limits and quotas, and here I can decide which tiers I want to enable for this product, right? So for example, gold was defined as a default tier. So by default, it's going to be there. But I could also say I want to add silver and bronze. And the rate limit and quotas for these, again, can vary. So for gold, I could say gold means that it's gold level. Silver means that it's mid-level. And even though backwards in meaning, I could say bronze is unlimited, right? So this just kind of defines what these tiers would mean for that product. I can then go and add APIs to the product. So if I go to the APIs tab, if I click on the Add API button, I could decide a deck of cards, trivia, and maybe WeatherBit, right? All those will be part of my product. So I can save that. Now I've associated all 3 of these APIs are part of the office hours product. And then lastly, I can go to the organizations and I can decide which organizations I want to have access to this product. So if I click add organization, maybe I want to have ABC and Acme added, and I'm going to maybe make them silver users. And then perhaps I'll add the sample org and allow them to be added, and I'm going to make them a bronze user. So once I save that, I'll be able to see that I have these 3 organizations, each with access to the product, 2 of them at the silver tier, 1 of them at the bronze tier. And from that point, I can actually go into the individual organization and begin to enable each application within that organization to have access to the product. So that's really it in a nutshell. Are there any questions? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
Yep, thanks.
There is sorry, it's Vince. So on an API product, when you subscribe and you want an API key, is that a single API key for that product which will give you access to those APIs, or do you have to have separate ones for the APIs still?
No, yeah, it'll be done as a whole. So if I go into the application view, and actually let me go to manage applications, click the thing. Here I'll be able to, let's see, I think I did ABC apps. Here I will be able to, in the products tab, actually add the product that's enabled. So for example, this is office hours. Once I save that, the API key that is available for this application will have access to all APIs within this office hours product.
Okay, understood. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Greg. Great question, Vince. I'm going to go ahead now and demonstrate a number of the different gateway addressability features, beginning with GraphMan. Again, that one's been around for a little while now. Many of you probably already seen it, but if you haven't, we definitely want you to see it now. Again, it's available as preview in 10.1 CR3, and it'll be available as preview in 11.0 CR1 soon. And again, it's very foundational for many other things we're working on, and some of the other things I'm going to demonstrate, including the Layer7 operator and static and dynamic config as code, depend on GraphMan. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So GraphMan does have a tech docs page in the 10.1 tech docs because it's been released as preview in 10.1 CR3. And again, GraphMan is a newer, more flexible, capable management API for the Gateway as compared to RESTman. Though we're going to continue to maintain GMU and RESTman indefinitely at this point. So if you have a big investment in them, don't feel like you have to throw it all away and move to GraphMan. Rather, look at GraphMan for what it's able to do and that RESTman perhaps hasn't been able to do. And this is a good comparison of the two from that perspective, and start using it for to address these issues that you may have been having with GMU and RESTman, but also perhaps start using it for new use cases going forward. So there is a tech docs page for it. There is also well, actually, let me just go to Policy Manager first. So I'm going to go to 10.1 CR3 release of Policy Manager. Because it's been released as preview, it comes out of the box with Policy Manager, but has to be published as an internal service, just like you would do with RESTman. So now you also have the Gateway GraphQL management service option here with the GraphMan URI. So I'm going to go ahead and publish that, and now GraphMan is published to this gateway. I can also bootstrap GraphMan on Gateway Startup if I want to automatically publish it when deploying gateways. So now that I've published GraphMan to this gateway, let's take a look at some other things that exist in this environment. I have some example APIs here that leverage a framework of policy fragments that's found under this folder hierarchy here. That's further driven by some cluster properties that they reference for plan subscription here. And I show you this because deploying these assets with GraphMan is what we're going to sort of demonstrate next. So GraphMan also comes with a GraphMan client that is sort of the GraphMan alternative to the GMU. And we've made that client available in our Layer7 community utilities repo. So let me go ahead and show you that quickly. So if you go out to our Layer7 community utilities repo, you can find the GraphMan client here. It has a very concise README that gives you some information how to set up and use it with some examples of use. I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio Code here, where I have that repo open. in the left, in my Explorer on the left-hand side, together with a bunch of other repos I'm going to be using when I demonstrate. I have the README open here too. And again, if you go through this README, it's pretty quick, concise, shows you how to set it up in terms of environment variables that you would want to set, other values you'd want to configure in your GraphMan configuration file, and then some very basic commands that support some of the most common use cases our customers would have to export, import configuration across gateways, across environments. And I'm going to go ahead now and use the GraphMan client to export all of the configuration of my source gateway that we were just looking at in Policy Manager. And it did that to a GraphMan bundle file that you see here now, which is formatted in JSON, unlike the RESTman XML bundle files. And this has all of that gateway's configuration that can currently be exported by GraphMan. At the same time, I might want to do that more selectively. And there's a variety of ways to do that, but one of the more easy ways of doing is by exporting the contents of a folder and all of the dependencies of those things. And so, for example, I can export using the folder query, passing in the name of the folder that I want to export, and I'll put that to my APIs.json. So here's another JSON bundle that now only contains my APIs and any of their dependencies that would have been selected by the query. So lastly, when we think of static or dynamic configuration of code from different sources of truth, the direction we're going in with our reference architecture is for the primary source of truth for that configuration to be a Git repo. And so right here, I've got 3 different Git repos that represent those APIs, the framework, and the subscription cluster-wide properties that I showed you in Policy Manager. And many of our customers are going to want to not work with one big big JSON bundle that has everything in it, but rather they're going to want to explode the contents of that bundle into a hierarchy of individual files that they can manage individually in the Git repo. With all the capabilities that a Git repo would give you for configuration management, including branching, committing, submitting pull requests that go through an approval process, right? And you're going to see later with the Layer7 operator's ability to monitor that. So I also cloned all 3 of these repos here. How would we explode a bundle into those repos? We can do that with another GraphMan client command. So let me just go ahead and show you how we can do that here. I'm going to take that my bundle JSON that has everything, and I'm going to explode it into this exploded folder. And now you can see a hierarchy of folders related to different resources and a folder related to the service and policy tree and policy manager. And now I have individual files representing all of these different things. And of course, I could have exploded that into a cloned Git repo on my laptop, and then just gone ahead and committed those changes, to get them into the repo. So I've got these 3 different repos here, already cloned to my my laptop. One contains just the tree structure of my APIs. One contains the framework that's supports those APIs, and one contains just the cluster properties that manage plan subscriptions leveraged by that framework and those APIs. Now, another nice thing about the GraphMan client that's available in the GitHub, the community Layer7 community repo, is that it comes with a Postman collection. So while I was doing a lot of these things using the Node.js GraphMan client, you also can import that Postman collection into Postman and call the GraphMan API to do a lot of those things directly. So when I import the Postman collection into Postman at the collection level, I can configure my GraphMan authorization, which defaults to basic auth. I can configure other collection variables that are then referenced by many of the examples that are included in the Postman collection. So for example, if I wanted to go and make an GraphMan API call to get everything, I can just do that here. It knows to go to the source gateway I configured in one of my collection environment variables using the basic auth credentials I also provided at the collection level to authenticate. And I got back my response. The nice thing about being able to work with this in Postman then is, of course, it gives you all the other tools available through Postman, including documentation of the GraphQL schema of the GraphMan API, the ability to generate code snippets to make those same calls in a variety of different ways. So that's a very nice usability feature there. So again, many things begin with GraphMan in terms of CI/CD and migrating your configuration across gateways, across environments. Now we're going to switch over to a demonstration of the experimental Layer 7 operator, which is becoming a new way to not just deploy and scale gateways in a Kubernetes environment, but also to actively manage them at runtime. For things like static and dynamic configuration of code as those, from a Git source of truth, as well as other capabilities we plan to add to the operator going forward. For example, the operator will be responsible for one way of externalizing secrets, key, cert management from your gateways integrated with different industry standard solutions for those things. So if I go to the operator, let's go back to Visual Code. Just to save some time, I had deployed the experimental operator example using a makefile that has different arguments for, supporting deploying it to different types of environments. But for example, the makefile supports creating a kind cluster and deploying the example to your kind cluster locally on your laptop, which is very convenient for just evaluating the experimental version of Layer 7 operator. And so, again, to save some time, I deployed this earlier at about 8:35. I ran my make command to deploy the Layer 7 operator in a kind cluster on my laptop. And about 3 minutes later, it was finished with that deployment. And a lot of that time is just, consumed by waiting for different things to deploy before deploying the next thing. So I have a local kind cluster running. I could do kind get clusters named Layer 7. That is my current Kubernetes context. So I could check the status of the different resources running in my cluster right now. And I can see that we've got several different pods running. One of them is a gateway pod. One of them is running, one of them is the Layer 7 operator management pod. And another one is being used to deploy Jaeger, Prometheus, Grafana to demonstrate the open telemetry tracing and metrics. We also support deploying an optional Nginx ingress controller to make accessing those different services easier on your laptop. If you're going to deploy this to another Kubernetes environment, you might already have an existing ingress controller. So again, we've tried to make the deployment of this layer 7 operator experimental layer 7 operator very flexible so that you can experiment with it in different environments. So the way the operator works and knows what gateways you want to deploy and how it should configure those with static or dynamic code from a Git repository sources of truth is beginning with these gateway custom resources. And so this would tell the operator how many gateways of what version based upon the image tag it should deploy. And down below, how it should configure those with static or dynamic configuration from different Git repository sources of truth. And that just names the repositories here to reference repository custom resources that are further configured down here. So the repository custom resource is basically giving a name to a Git repo identified by its URL, the branch of that Git repo that you want it to pull the configuration from statically or dynamically. And then basically the operator is responsible for deploying the gateways, getting the configuration, the exploded configuration from those repos, employing that back into bundles, providing those bundles to the gateways to be bootstrapped statically on startup, or if it's monitoring those repos for changes over time, and the repo is a static repo, then it will cause a rolling update to trigger your gateways to pick up the new changes again on startup. Or if it's monitoring those repos as dynamic config as code sources of truth, then it will just get the changes and apply them dynamically through the Grafman API without causing a gateway restart. So what might that look like? Let's go to Postman and call one of the APIs that's been deployed to my gateways now. So I'm going to open up Postman. We'll go ahead and make this REST API call to the API in my Pine cluster. Using this client ID, notice that they belong to this plan, and we're currently delivering this value, returning this value in the response. If we go back to my configuration as code, the plan subscriptions being managed in the subscriptions repository, which the gateway is pointing to as a dynamic source of truth. So what I can do is go up to my subscription repo here. And again, if I'm currently in plan A, I can switch this client from plan A by removing it from the plan A cluster-wide property and assign them to plan B by adding them to this cluster property. So I just made two changes in this repo. Then now I can go ahead and commit and sync back to the repo. And the operator is actively running in that Kubernetes environment, actually. Constantly monitoring this repo for changes. And once it detects those changes, it's going to go ahead and pull those changes and dynamically apply them to the gateways running in Kubernetes in order to pick them up. So if I go back now to my API, make this request again, you can see that the plan switched to plan B. Now we also are monitoring some repos statically. And for example, that cluster-wide property value is found in my framework under cluster-wide properties under here. and my gateway is monitoring this repo statically. So I could come in here and make a change here and say, you know, hello office hours, save that change, commit that change. And again, pretty soon the operator is going to pick up that change in its config as code source of truth. And when it does, because that's a static source of truth, we're going to see it go ahead and do a rolling update of its gateway pods. So you can see that it's initializing some new pods that are going to be bootstrapped with these changes from the repo. And when these come up, it will bring down the other pods, you know, again, effectively performing that rolling update. Now, we're not going to wait for that to take effect just yet. We're going to move on. We'll see that take effect later. What I want to go to now is show you the OTel tracing that this layer 7 operator also demonstrates by deploying a custom version of the gateway that supports OTel out of the box directly and also with an OTel assertion, both used in different ways. And so let me go ahead, and for that, I'm going to show you Jaeger, which has been deployed. And actually, out of the box, this example is tracing many things, and you can configure what gets traced and filter that in many different ways. But for example, this is tracing gateway database calls, it's tracing other things, you know, at the OS level on up all the way through the gateway application stack. But more interesting probably to most of us is the API traffic that it's tracing. So for example, I can go in here and search for the REST API. Interesting. Sure enough. It is not finding it. The demo gods have caught up to me here, folks. The good news is we've got a recording of this demonstration where we can show you that. And so we definitely don't want you to miss out on that. I'm also getting a time check here. So I apologize for that. Rather than try to figure out why I'm not showing you the traces here, just know that when you deploy this layer 7 operator, it should also deploy the gateway that supports the OTel tracing with Jaeger to present those traces to you. Oh, here we go. Just a time thing. So this is one of my REST API calls where I'm tracing all the way down to the policy assertion level. You are able to inspect changing values of context variables if you configure your tracing as such. I'm not going to show, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip through that. I am going to show you that also available with this layer 7 operator experimental deployment. We are demonstrating pushing OpenTelemetry metrics to Grafana dashboards for monitoring health and capacity of your gateways, as well as the services and APIs that are running on them. So let me go ahead and just show you that really quickly. And while the OS level, service level, policy level, assertion level, OpenTelemetry tracing is configurable and automatic and built into the custom gateway version delivered with the experimental layer 7 operator. So it does not actually manifest itself as changes in your policy. The other metrics that are driving this dashboard are actually being emitted by a new metrics assertion that allows you to control custom metrics that get pushed via open telemetry to collectors. And in this example, through Prometheus to Grafana. And for that, I could show you really quickly what that would look like. By connecting to the container gateway running in this environment. So again, there's several different ways we've instrumented the gateway for OTel, either by making core gateway changes that are configurable, but then otherwise automatic, or by also introducing a new policy assertion that allows you to emit custom telemetry metrics in policy. And here we just put that in a global message complete policy fragment to emit these metrics with every API request. So if I go back to my dashboard, then that is the assertion in the custom metrics that it's emitting that are is driving many of these dashboards that you see here. The last things I wanted to show you really quickly, and I know we're at time, Bill, these only take a few more minutes, so I'll let you decide if you want to go over this to capture this in the recording, is the decoupling of the OTK from the gateway with the OAuth token introspection that works out of the box with our OTK, but also other industry standard OAuth providers, and the distributed key value storage assertion. I imagine many of you might need to drop, but Bill, do you want to keep going for a few minutes just to
get let's get this recorded.
Okay. So if I show you now the OAuth token introspection assertion, let me go ahead and go to another policy manager instance here where I have this sample policy that basically requires a valid OAuth token either provided by our OTK or Auth0. Notice that the OTK is not installed but hidden on this gateway at all. So this gateway only has this require and introspect OAuth token assertion on it. And yet, you know, it can require and validate OAuth in policy using the OTK deployed separately as a service or another industry standard OAuth provider. This assertion takes a number of configuration properties, some of which can be set by default in terms of where to get the token from, which token issuer to validate against, whether you want to require one or more specific scopes or audiences, and it's going to set a variety of output context variables based upon the result of the assertion. And if it does have to make an introspection call to the OAuth provider, then it will also include the full OAuth introspection response back from that provider. I say if it does because this assertion can handle both opaque and signed and encrypted JWT token assertions. So for opaque assertions, it definitely has to make a request to the introspection endpoint of the OAuth provider so that the OAuth provider can make can validate that opaque token for the gateway. But for signed and encrypted JWT tokens, we can validate the token just based upon the signature and expiry and other attribute values of the JWT token assertion itself. This leverages some cluster properties to control its configuration, including a cluster property where you configure your known issuers. And again, we've got one configured for the OTK and one for Auth0. Secrets in here can be referenced through secured password context variables instead of showing them in clear text like you see here. And then this is how you specify your default. There's a few more cluster-wide properties to control the caching of the validation decision that we make at runtime. So I can go to Postman quickly, and I can call the introspection API on that gateway without a valid token. And so it should fail as an unauthorized request. This particular Postman request is set up to get a token from the OTK, which is actually running on my Gateway 11 cluster in this environment. So again, it's a separate OTK deployment, operated as a service on behalf of this 10.1 CR3 gateway that I deployed the require and introspect OAuth token assertion to. And so I'm going to go ahead and get a new OTK token. And make that same request. And these are the values that are output from the successful require and introspect OAuth token assertion against our OTK and returned in that template response from the policy. I can do the same thing for OAuth or Auth0 now, which I'm using password credentials for to get a OAuth token from Auth0. Send that request, and it also gets validated. So that's the OAuth token introspection using that experimental require and introspect OAuth token assertion that works with our OTK but other industry standard OAuth providers and doesn't require any components of our OTK to be installed on the gateway that uses it. Now to very quickly show you the distributed key value storage assertion, I'm going to go to a policy manager connection to my Gateway 11 cluster I have. I'll show you in the dashboard that there's a cluster of 2 gateways here. I've got 2 policies actually, let me just go and show you what that, and that both those gateways are connected to an external Hazelcast instance in my environment. So if I go to that, one second here. Oh, I've closed that. That's why I didn't find it. You can see this external Hazelcast instance. There are currently 2 clients connected to it. Those are my Gateway 11A and 11B gateways in that Gateway 11 cluster. And now if I go back to Policy Manager, you'll see I've got this sample policy. I got 2 policies, one that uses local cache keyed off of the request URL to store the gateway node's name and time to that cache. And if it has already been stored and gets a cache hit, it's going to go ahead and return that value. And then I've got a very similar policy assertion, but that uses the experimental distributed key value assertion instead, which is going to share that state, in this case, an external Hazelcast, using this key. So I can demonstrate this by going to Postman and sending a few requests here. I'll start with a request to the API that uses local cache on Gateway 11A. It went ahead and cache the node name at this time. And it's going to do that for about 10 seconds. So 10 seconds later, that key value expired. It went ahead and cached a new key value here. But if I go straight to gateway 11B and send this, notice that it doesn't pick up that existing value because local cache is only in memory per gateway. It's not shared across memories, gateways. It's not distributed, right? But if I go to my distributed key value storage example and send a request, you see that it's gateway 11A at this time. And if I go straight to gateway 11B and send the same request, notice that it's also finding that gateway 11A value. If I send it again, 10 seconds later, it refreshes it with gateway 11B. If I go back to look at my Hazelcast cluster and the maps, I can see that it's being stored in this value here, if I do it fast enough. So most immediately, this experimental distributed key value storage assertion works with external Hazelcast. Eventually, when we provide Redis as an alternative to external Hazelcast in upcoming gateway releases, it will also support that. Eventually, it may also support all the other external cache providers that the current tactical remote cache assertion does, or that are at least being used by people using that assertion, so that eventually this could be an out-of-the-box replacement to that tactical assertion. So I know that was a lot to take in, and I know we went over, so I apologize for that. But hopefully this was a helpful preview of our progressive delivery model for you so that you understand this is a relatively new model that we've adopted, again, to try to deliver new functionality to you faster so that you can give us feedback earlier to influence how that functionality advances with enhancements and based on demand. And just know that there's already a lot of that available to you right now. And we encourage you to go out there and request access to it so you can download it, start playing with it, provide us your feedback. Again, anything that's preview either is already in product releases that you may have. It might need to be enabled via a feature flag like the API products preview feature in the portal, or it's just going to be immediately available to you in those gateway versions, which is not currently using feature flags for preview features. So before we wrap up, any last minute questions or comments on anything that you saw today?
So Ben, I'll chime in. There's a few questions in chat. I can read them out to you if you'd like. The first one I'll take care of right away. Tazwell asked if this is going to be available on the YouTube channel. Yes, it is going to be uploaded to YouTube later today, and it'll be available through communities with a link to that YouTube channel. And then Ben, Vince asked, what performance hit is there for using these fine-grained metrics?
It's not something we've measured closely just yet since this is experimental. We're definitely going to be scrutinizing that going forward, even as we add additional ways to filter, which metrics get emitted versus captured for which consumers of which services, so that you can basically, probably, as recommended by us, turn this on very selectively when needed. Though we already have, some customers that have use cases where they might leave this always on in some more filtered, less intrusive way, so that they're constantly capturing a sampling of metrics that would be available to them on demand.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely something for us to keep our eye on going forward. Good question. Anybody else have any other questions?
There was another question, where can I get GraphMan?
All right, so what I also just did is I also just pasted a bunch of additional resource links into the web meeting chat. They'll also be found in the last slide of the presentation, but they're long links, so you won't want to have to type them again. So if you're still on this call, you're going to want to copy them out of the chat. Bill, let's just make sure we post all those links with the post of this office hours to the community portal so that they're kind of easily available to people there too. But to get GraphMan, it's been released as preview in 10.1 CR3. So you could just download and deploy any of our 10.1 CR3 gateway form factors, including a tagged container image, and then publish GraphMan either by bootstrapping it on startup or by publishing it through Policy Manager to start playing with GraphMan. It's also going to come out as preview in 11 CR1, which is currently estimated to be delivered, to be released on August 9th, though that's always subject to change. So if you're already a Gateway 11 customer and want to try GraphMan with Gateway 11, you don't have long to wait for that. If you absolutely needed GraphMan for Gateway 11 right now, the GraphMan assertion that comes out of the box with 10.1 CR3 will work with 11. So you could either pull it out of there and deploy it to 11, or we could make that available to you via a box share. So that's how you would get access to GraphMan. Again, how you'd get access to any of these other features starts with those links to additional resources and the post for those features in the community portal, especially if they're experimental, because you would ask for access to those experimental features through the community portal. If they're preview, they'll be in a major release. The only one of those you currently have to access in a preview capacity is the API portal products feature by having support flip the feature flag for your instance.
So what I will do is get all these links and put them into a communities post along with the recording today. It will be later on this afternoon. We have time for one more question and then we need to wrap it up. Is there anybody else that has a question out there?
Got my hand up, if that's okay. Very quick, a question that I did ask. GraphMan, does it actually handle dependencies rather than what's in a folder that you're going to take? I've heard that it doesn't. I'm not sure.
Actually, it handles whatever the query you construct for it asks it to handle. And that can include dependency references in that query. And I maybe
got. If I just went and I said, I want a policy, and I want a bundle for that policy, it would not take whatever there is referenced in that policy as well with it.
Yeah, honestly, I'd have to follow up. I do know it'll grab dependencies. I believe it's done through the query mechanism, and our queries do select dependencies by default, depending on the query and what it was designed for. But you can be selective and eliminate those two. And it's going to behave differently based on the API versus the GraphMan client, which also has some of the dependency logic built into it.
Okay.
A good question. Let me follow up with you on that.
Take a look at that.
I'm not a GraphMan expert myself yet.
Thank you.
You bet.
Right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. The next office hours for Layer 7 will be July 20th at the same time. And as I said before, I'll get this recording up to the community site this afternoon, and that will link to a YouTube channel copy. And I'll also make sure those links are available. So thank you very much for coming. Appreciate you staying, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, folks. Take care.
Thank you.